Welcome to On the Tape. I'm your host, Danny Moses. Today, I'm extremely fortunate to have best-selling author and friend Michael Lewis join me, and there is so much we're going to get to. But for our listeners, I think we start with how we first met, Michael, and we got to get to the book and then the movie. But maybe you want to tell that story because I have my version. I'd love to hear yours.
Your version's gonna be different from mine because mine's pretty vague. I I was reading Meredith Whitney's stuff on wherever she was publishing it leading into the financial crisis, and I called her up because I was interested in what she was writing. She was kind of prescient about the whole thing, and she said, that I had to talk to a guy named Steve Eisman, and that he was someone who that I'd find interesting on the subject of what was going on in the financial markets. And you all were at that point at Front Point, is that what it's called? Capital,
Yep.
but I can't remember. Yep. And I on the side of Morgan Stanley, and I came and visited your offices. And I think that's where you and I met. I think you're actually sitting at your trading desk. But it was you and Vinny and Porter and Steve. And for the next year, while I was working on The Big Short, you all were one of three main characters in that book. But for the next year, there was this running pleasure of both you explaining to me what was going on, you explaining to me what Greg Lippman was doing at Deutsche Bank, you explaining how your mind was being blown by what you had seen, and but mainly you explaining to me Steve Eisman, which which was its own great subject. So that's how we met, and we've been friends ever since.
I will tell you that I was just talking to Vinny and Porter about this the other day, and Vinny was complimenting you on your style in terms of how you ask questions. We were learning as much from you as you were learning from us, meaning the questions you were asking, we were saying to ourselves, wow, why is he asking that question? Is this really, where is he getting that information? Are things really worse than we even think that they are? Because where you went
Mhm.
into and the people that you were talking to were like, this is a deep web here that we've gone into. And I remember when the article first came out, I think it was the end of 2008, right? We weren't
Yep,
sure if it was going to be a book. You probably had better
yep,
inkling than we did, but you wrote it. It was very timely because the shit was still going on in real
mm,
time while you were writing it. So I know most of the time you write an article. Well, when you write a book, it's already occurred, whatever may have occurred. But in an article, it was literally going to its apex at that exact moment. So for us, it was in real time, kind of bouncing this thing. We read this article, and then obviously you ended up writing the book. Came out in March 2010, right?
I wonder when I actually came in there. I engaged with the subject somewhere between Bear Stearns going down and Lehman Brothers going down. I really engaged. I showed up at some point after Bear Stearns had gone down. Did I know it was a book? No. In fact, it did just start as, oh, it was kind of interesting to me because it felt like it was a natural bookend to Liar's Poker, that a lot of the stuff that was going on, I could see the seeds of it in Liar's Poker, and I'd never thought of Liar's Poker as the beginning of anything. I just thought it was sort of the beginning, middle, and end of its own thing. So that got me interested in the book length version. But then there was just this, it's funny how things get framed, but that when you asked people like Greg Lippman, who sat in the middle of the market, give me a list of everybody who shorted subprime in a really meaningful way. Not just people who dabbled or used it as a hedge or whatever, but people who kind of went all in on the short, on the big short. And that list was sufficiently small. It was like 18 people. Something it was 18 institutions or people. That kind of size that I could go around and pick the characters, do a kind of casting search. I've never had such a clean story that way, and just pick the sort of cat see, after speaking to basically all of them, sort of classify them by how they got to the right answer and put them in the buckets. See that there were basically I kind of thought of it as 3 different buckets. Um, and pick the best one out of the bucket. And you guys were so clearly the best one out of one bucket. And that bucket, part of that bucket, I mean, it wasn't a lot of smart people got it wrong. So it wasn't just being smart. You all had right through your institution such a cynicism about Wall Street. You all had all one way or another come around in your heads to Wall Street's capable of doing really bad stuff. And that it left you predisposed to being able to see what was going on. Like this could happen. A lot of people just thought this couldn't happen. Like Wall Street would never do this, and you all had no illusions about it, none.
And I think you were as shocked as we were that it turned into a movie that Paramount and Plan B and Adam McKay in 2013 and 14 were able to take what you wrote. And people ask us all the time, how accurate? I go, well, the book's 100% accurate, at least what we told you and what you wrote about. The movie's like, 70 to 75%. But when it came to Steve Eisman, it was 100%. I mean, the zero and all that stuff, you couldn't even make that up if you tried to write fiction about something like that because it was so naturally happening. I think that's what you picked up upon. And I think what you always say in your books is you look for characters to be able to tell the story through that are authentic. And I think you nailed it as it relates to Steve. And I think our team that we were just going with the flow and it was as good as you thought it was in terms of, is that really the story? You're like, yeah. And you just kept coming for more. So that was quite a time. So I want to move forward here to you right after that. So the book comes out, Big Short, March 2010. The flash crash happens, May 6, 2010, like no rest for the weary. I call you and I say, Michael, there's something here. I think you have your next book. And you say, I really appreciate that, Danny. No one really tells me that, but thanks for the information. I'll come back to you. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you found out the Goldman Sachs programmer that ended up getting indicted and then convicted. You said, hold on a second. If Goldman's going after somebody for something, and the story was amazing how you kind of evolved it. You called me back. You go, all right, who are the people this time around? And I'm like, Brad Katsuyama. So tell that story also, because I think it's
Yeah,
fascinating. Like
no.
literally 6 weeks.
So I got to tell you, most people go over when they're telling you what I should write a book about. That I get so many suggestions, and they're like basic mistakes that people make. They think that, oh, this funny anecdote's a book, or this wild character is a book, and so I've just gotten a little numb to recommendations. And even you, when you were called and said this, I kind of, all right, it's very sweet that he wants to tell me what the book is about. So I paid no attention. And then, but you had, my memory is you had said to me, this dude just walked into our office and explained to me how explained us how our stock trades are being executed, and how, with the market being automated, essentially the HFTs have walked in and are basically front running everybody. And that it's explaining to us patterns we're seeing in the market, and this guy will blow your mind. And I heard that, and I'm like, well, whatever. Like, I'm not oddly. I tend to. I think I'm always in a mindset of avoiding Wall Street books. I think after I wrote Liar's Poker, I thought I'm never going to write another one, and they keep forcing themselves on me because they're so good.
Godfather.
This
He pulling me back in.
he,
Right.
he keeps pulling me. It's the same thing. It is exactly this, and I now understand that it's going to pull me back in again and again and again. But so what happened was, then the lawyer for Serge Zelenikov, who was the Goldman Sachs programmer, is someone I knew. He called me out of the blue and he said, I got this wild case. Like, Goldman Sachs is going after someone, after one of their former it was a HFT programmer, Russian guy, for leaving with code that they said in the wrong hands could destroy financial markets as we know them. And my first thought was like, wait, Goldman Sachs is the right hands? If there's code that will destroy the world as we know it, we want it inside Goldman Sachs. I thought, this is it. This is an odd thing. And so I started paying attention to HFT, which was kind of when HFT was sort of rising into the public consciousness. And so I remember you saying, oh, this guy came in and explained this. And you and Brad and Ronan, Brad's right-hand man, and
Yep.
I think Vinny, and maybe Porter, went out to dinner one night in New York. And and we just listened to Brad talk. And at the end of it, I thought, Jesus Christ, Danny was right. I mean, it took me 6 months to get the conviction to say, oh, yes, really, it's a book. But I really kind of thought, oh, this is a book. I mean, and it was, Brad Katsuyama was clearly in his own way a great character, in his own way not, because like he has nothing wrong with him. He's just like this nice Canadian guy. But he, the fact that he'd done so much homework investigating how the markets worked, and he started innocent and he got cynical. That was interesting, and just it was bewildering what had happened in the markets. It was amazing, and it was physical. You could see it physically. People were locating themselves between your trade and the exchange, and picking up what you were doing before it got to the exchange. That kind of stuff. I was just wild, and so you were responsible for you get a piece of The Big Short, and you're entirely responsible for Flash Boys. I mean, like, I never would have done that book ever. Now, in your not this is the opposite of your defense. You have called me since and said you got to write a book about X, and I have not done it. Now, it doesn't mean it wasn't a great book. You said, well, you had one of you remember what the recommendation was?
Was it cannabis?
Yes, it was weed.
Well, you went to another vice of mine, which I love, which is sports gambling, which we're going to get into right now. I just want to say one thing that on the high frequency trading, what happened was in 2008 and 2009, these guys from Credit Suisse would walk in the office and say, "Hey, Danny, how you doing? We're gonna charge you zero commission from now on." And when that happens, from a behavioral finance perspective, you say, "Free? Really? Is it free?" And so I'm like, "Okay, this is interesting. Well, we'll try." And they give you rebates, and all of a sudden they're paying you to trade. So when that happens in our world, you're like, "All right, who's the sucker?" I'm at the poker table, literally, who was the sucker? And you realize you're trading in dark pools against prop desks that are owned and run by these broker dealers. Like, that was the first thing. And so you knew that market structure. And this, I think, really is a great lead into the sports gambling. And the reason I say that is if you're given the tools to kind of hurt yourself over a period of time or not realize what is happening to you when someone offers you something, you just have to start to question it. So this is your fifth season of the podcast Against the Rules, right? This one in particular on sports gambling, and I made a small cameo in episode number 7, I
Not so
believe.
small, not so small.
Not so small, but I want to say that you had 10 regular episodes, and I want to talk about a couple of those, but 21 total because you had 11 special episodes. And I'm wondering if it just happened to be Blackjack 21 that did you come to 21 on its own? Was that completely random, or what do you got?
No, the truth is horrible. The truth is that podcast economics have changed, and these seasons only work if it's got a lot of shows, and you get a different kind of advertiser if you have 20 episodes and if you have 7 scripted episodes. So I think in the past I've had 6 or 7 scripted episodes, and the scripts, they take a long time. I mean, they're like long magazine pieces. I'm essentially writing them and got to interview a whole bunch of people for each one. So we cheated. We did the 10 scripted episodes, and then just took some of the interviews I did for the scripted episodes and ran them full as their own episodes. And so I think of it, if I wanted this thing to live, if I told people how to go listen to it, I say, go listen to just the 10 scripted episodes. It's obvious what they are. And it's the story of this thing that's just happened in the country, and it's under your nose, right? I mean, you can't turn on anything on any sports on television without being bombarded by these ads. And that's been true for some years now. And no one's really kind of dug into it. So it was an opportunity to dig into it. And you're right, it's funny. It rhymes with HFT. And because there's this predatory streak to the whole thing that's just kind of gross. And with it, people are not really rebelling against, even though it's kind of gross.
Well, I have a theory on it, which is during COVID, you had the complete gamification of the markets. You had crypto advent, these meme coins, right? Meme stocks, and gambling happened to be coming on at that exact moment, right? The states were approving. And so you had growth at the same time. And even to this day, I think people think of zero to days to expire, these zero DTE options, right? And the people are buying. That's gambling, right? Or buying a meme coin. That's gambling. And the amazing thing is, Michael, is that Ken Griffin wins again, right? In terms of zero DTE options. Who do you think the market makers in that are kind of creating that? So from that sense, it's even more similar than you would think in terms of who the house is. But I personally hear all your concerns, and I view it to me as entertainment more than anything. And people that don't think it's entertainment and think that they can make money from it, everything you've said is 100% accurate. And the minds of adolescent boys, and I want to talk about your son Walker, who in this last episode kind of messed around with some money and actually won money. But I got bad news for you, Michael. I think when he gets to college, wherever that is, he might dabble in it again. I could just feel it. I hope I'm wrong, but I think right? So tell me about that journey and even ending it with your son in terms of the episode.
So one of the things that runs right through the season is it is predatory, and it's predatory in the sense the FanDuels and the DraftKings have superhuman ability to determine whether you know what you're doing or not. If you actually have a systematic edge, if you're a sharp, if you're effectively the card counter in the casino, they identify it very, very quickly, even if you lost money, They can see that you're making positive expected value bets, and they kick you out or limit you so drastically that you might as well be kicked out. So this sort of violates my basic notions of fairness. But anyway, so all they're looking for is people who are expected to lose money, and the biggest population of people engaged in the activity are young men. I mean, it's like it's not just it's all over colleges, all over colleges in a way I did not appreciate. So I interviewed Charlie Baker, who's the former governor of Massachusetts, and he is the current head of the NCAA. And when he got the job at the NCAA, he kind of wandered around college campuses to see what the hell was going on, and he was shocked by how many athletes said, this gambling stuff is just like toxic. Like I can't leave my dorm room after a game if I don't like make my point totals. People are bothering me for tips. You know, I'm getting death threats, this kind of stuff. I mean, he was shocked by it. So he commissioned a study to see how many people were gambling on college campuses. And it was north of 60% of the men on college campuses in the United States right now are gambling on sports. It's a number, the number is crazy. It's so crazy, I kind of don't believe it. You know, it's like I really 60%. But what's also clear, if you just kind of wander anecdotally into your local high school, something that like that number seems to be happening in high school too. I mean, we're in California where it is illegal, and of course these are all minors. So you would think none of my son's classmates would be gambling on sports. I went over and talked to his English class a couple months ago, and while I was doing it, he for fun just said to the whole class, "Could everybody raise their hand who's gambling on sports?" And there were like 30 kids there, half boys, half girls. All but one of the boys raised his hand. It's just like they're all doing it. So I thought predatory industry, stupid activity if you think you're going to make money doing it. I can understand doing it just like it's a lark. You have a lot of money, you can waste a little bit of it gambling on sports. It makes the sports more interesting to you. But I thought I want, this is yet another thing in the world alongside like drugs or smoking or whatever that is essentially predatory force aimed at my son's brain. I want to teach him. I want to like inoculate him. Um, and so my wife got very upset about this. She wasn't just kind of upset, she was really upset. Like he's got ADHD. He's exactly the kind of kid who's going to get, develop a gambling addiction. How dare you? You're going to give him 5 grand and let him gamble it in the markets. And I said, look, he's going to do it anyway. Let him do it with me watching from a distance. And I think what he's going to do is take my $5,000 and just vaporize it. And he's going to be embarrassed. He's going to think because he thinks he knows things he doesn't know. And so we gave him the 5 grand, essentially put a wire on him, put a GoPro on his head, and had him just go do what he was going to do. And he did it with a friend who was a couple of years older and who was already had a bit of a gambling issue. And off they went. And the episode's so fun because these things, they can be contrived. Like you can feel like you're kind of forcing the material around. It just evolved as a story. They actually start gambling and start winning. They actually think they know what they're doing when they don't. We give them access to pro gamblers they can call and get tips from. And so you can hear that conversation. They never make a bet that I think of as a smart bet, that any pro would think of as a smart bet. They're just at the vicissitudes of luck. And they go from like 5 grand to 8 grand. They got up 2 or 3 grand, and then they lose almost all of it. Like they get down to like 2 grand or something. And this is where it gets very funny. Then they go dark on us, like we don't know what they're doing for a stretch. And then they emerge and they're up 4 grand or almost 4 grand. And and they know what they did was dumb, but they did it anyway. My son's friend found a dude on Discourse who worked at Taco Bell and who had gained some sort of reputation as a tipster. They just took his tips and just did them all.
Right.
I know, it's
And they won.
unbelievably
Right.
and they won. But
Right.
then the great moment was I turned to my son and I said, like, this is weeks into it. What's the next bet? He said, I am done with this. See, we're up 4 grand. We're going to keep the money. I'm giving you the 5 grand back and we're going to split the winnings. And I said, you won. Why'd you quit? He goes, I know now. Like, we don't know anything. Like, I know just how bad. He said, I felt like the pull of the desire to do it. I think it's dumb. It's not what I want to do with my life. So we're out. And And so he actually kind of got there. I agree it's possible that he'll be in like some fraternity or he'll be surrounded by guys who are doing it. He'll say, I do that and I won, and he'll dabble. But he now understands things like there are things you just need to understand in life that kids don't really get an education in. It's how to function in a financial market. But like if there's a market price, there's a reason for a market price. You bet if you think you know something that's not in the price, you better think really hard why you know it because like the market knows a lot. Someone will make a bet with you, they know things you don't know. There's like there's a reason they're offering you there's a reason they're offering you free trading at Credit Suisse. It's just that it's that kind of thinking that you get on Wall Street that you don't get in a fancy private high school.
I won't argue with that part of it, that they make it very easy. I will tell you though that as regulated companies, they do go out of their way to make sure that people are who they say they are. They're where they say that they are. So they're doing the things to abide by the law. But to your point, there's ways kind of around that. But I look at the lottery, which takes advantage more of low income consumers also as something. You go into a casino. My parents took me to Las Vegas Hilton when I was 7 years old. Okay. They threw us in the youth hotel with like the stars kids and stuff. And we're just hanging out there. Me and my sister, like, okay, I was exposed to this thing at a very young age. One of my first games on Atari was casino with the roller thing. I know the odds. I know like, but that's how my brain works. But I'm smart enough to know when to not make quote a bad bet. And I play by the book, and I still probably lose money in terms of the casino. But listen, they pump oxygen in the casino. They make the exits impossible to find. They put ATM machines with $10 if you're taking out $100 that you're going to pay in fees. So it's predatory in the entire sector, right?
Oh,
To a
no, no,
degree.
no, I agree. The difference is you got to go to the casino. That you don't have it in your pocket. And the difference also is the sports. I mean, this is an evolution of the technology that um, the sports gambling is being structured like slot machines. It's going to be in-game playing. It's designing itself to become the most addictive like form of gambling. Lottery gambling is not as addictive. It's hard, and plus there's a snag. If you ask me what like my public policy solution to the whole thing is, it isn't ban it all. I don't think you could, so that's not. It's almost pointless to try. Is to introduce snags, make it difficult. Also, there is something really awful about the sports apps, gambling apps, figuring out what your weaknesses are and programming to your weaknesses, getting you to make lower and lower expected value bets, getting you or getting you coaxing you into places where the vig is bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you look at like FanDuel's latest earnings call, it was really interesting. They celebrate this. It's like it's great. Our hold used to be 5%, now it's 15% because we're getting people to do three-legged parlays instead of just straight bets. And they said something else that was very interesting. And apropos of my son's education, they said Americans, it's much easier to do this with Americans than it is with Australians or with Brits. And I think it's because we're new to it. Like that we are in it. We're like it's like a population that hasn't seen smallpox. And that they've been through it, and fathers educate children there, kind of thing. And so you're just a little more wary in those markets. But we are a very vulnerable population now, and it's just different having the casino in your pocket. And it's really different when it's really easy for a 16-year-old to get around the rules and put money on things. And I mean, there's already studies coming out like declining savings rates, rising suicide rates, all this stuff. I do think it's going to be a public health problem. I think that we're in the early days, and 3 years from now, you and I would come back here, and the tenor of the conversation might be a little different.
I would say I think you would agree that the value of these sports teams, because of the media rights deals, are completely a result of gambling. Because there's
Yeah.
more eyes. Why am I watching the fourth quarter of the Golden State, Phoenix game to see if so and so is going to have over 17 and a half points? But my eyeballs are on it. So the genie's out of the bottle. There is absolutely zero going back to it. To your point, question is, can you help people kind of along the way? What shocks me the most about your research, and I've seen this firsthand, is the fact that you would kick people out for winning is insane to me, because at the end of the day, they're going to lose. Now, you're right. The parlay gamblers are the higher margin players. They're not going to cash out as much, right? They're going to keep chasing. They're chasing 20 to 1, 30 to 1, 40 to 1. And with the advent of event contracts and in these sports exchanges, which will actually cut into, I think, some of the market share of these big players over time, that's a whole nother issue that the CFTC is having a roundtable on a couple weeks. So this isn't going backwards, and the sports leagues, and I know you talked about, have completely, kind of bought into this. So really, from a tax generation perspective, they can tax it higher. Michael, I think the answer would be that states say, you know what, let's just keep taxing it. Let's, like Illinois did, let's just keep raising it, because what are they going to do? And unfortunately, some of these companies may react and make the odds even worse for the player. So it's really going to be
They've
really
said
interesting.
they've said that's what they're gonna do, is just pass it along to the gambler. I have a question for you about this, though, what you said early on, because it's something I wrestle with a little bit. So, does it bother you that casinos throw card counters out?
Listen, if you can count into a six deck shoe, you deserve everything that you can get. So yes, yes, it bothers me, because if you're capable of doing that, yes. So
Okay.
it does bother me, because that's part of the game. Listen, so we talk about poker and horses, which I know you're not as much against, one because you think those are games of skill, which I do too. But in poker, you're reading people, same thing, and you can kind of get a better idea. So you're using every tool that you have. So yes, I have a problem with kicking people out that are counting cards for sure.
That eliminates the question, because the defense of the FanDuels and the DraftKings is we're just kicking out the card counters. And it's interesting. They're not kicking you out because you won. So we got kicked out. One of my producer, Lydia Jean, who couldn't tell you the difference between a football and a baseball, and who hates gambling, like gets incredibly nervous, just like you gave her $5 to lay down on a track, her palms would sweat. She got given, I can't remember the number now, but it was like $100,000 or by a sharp to lay his bets and take a tiny little piece of it. So it was legal. So she had skin in the game, but she laid the bets of an edge player. And she lost at I can't remember which one, either FanDuel or DraftKings. She placed like, a couple of $5,000 bets on golf that didn't work out. And she got booted because they figured out
Crazy.
this is a smart, yeah, it's a smart
Yeah.
bet. So it's like people who have they're trying to find people who have found an edge. And what I was going to say is, if you said to me, yeah, it bothers me that or doesn't bother me, they kick out card counters, because I feel ambivalent about the card counting thing, but about this, I kind of feel like it's like the stock market. If you do the research to actually learn something about the market that nobody knows, you're actually bringing information into the marketplace to make prices more efficient. You should be allowed in the marketplace. Like you know something fundamental about this sport, this golfer, this free throw shooter, whatever it is that nobody else has figured out. You're not you should got you it there's something un-American about not letting that person in the market to make money from what they know. I know card counting, you kind of know something. I don't have the strongest feeling about the card counting.
I would tell you that there's still places that have two deck shoes. They deal them down, but you still see them at the end of the hand that they're up. So that's even easier. And they deal about, three quarters of the way through the two decks. So there are some places that offer that. I want to get to something that's really relevant right now also. And, Nostradamus has competition with you, but you wrote, a book, obviously, in 2018 called The Fifth Risk, which just was a look at the transition of the original Trump administration into the different department heads. And you were waiting. The book's about you going to the Department of Energy, Commerce. All right, where's everybody? And there was no transition teams that came. And so you
Right.
fast forward to right now. And you called this the fifth risk. And I believe I found the reason. I looked through some stuff. Is that you asked these people who the department heads, hey, what are the five biggest risks that you see? The Department of Energy is like, well, we could lose a nuclear weapon. North Korea could fire something on us. Iran could, and the vulnerability of the electrical grid. And then the last one was project management. So
Yeah.
that's why you called it the fifth risk. So as we sit here today, there isn't even going to be project management. There might not be any projects. I'd love to get your thoughts here and your current thoughts. And I know you have a new book coming out also, timely wise, which is amazing. Really follow on to this as well. So
Yeah. So the new book, which comes out in mid-March, is "Who is Government," which is profiles of the civil servants who are getting fired.
right, but
Um,
you were already doing
and
that, right?
yeah, no, so we did this. Yeah, most of these things were written right before the election. It's me and some other writers. I edited it and I wrote it about a third of it. But but the so my take on what's happening. Look, it's very hard to argue against let's make government more efficient. Sure, nice. Let's make it a little more efficient. There's no question that, like, if you're spending $7 trillion, there must be some waste in there somewhere. Also, no question, there are probably some old programs that nobody really wants anymore. They're still kind of like they're kind of sucking wind, but we're still paying for them. All that's definitely true. What's more true is the typical government agency is more scrutinized for fraud and waste than the typical private corporation. That there are, and the people who are in them are more terrified of being caught doing something bad. And the first thing that Elon Musk and Donald Trump do when they come in is fire the inspector generals whose job it is to identify waste and fraud and abuse. And they aren't beholden to their agencies. They're in their agencies as kind of spies for Congress to tell Congress if anything bad is going on. And they often do. So they first thing they do is eliminate the mechanism for finding the actual waste, fraud, and abuse. It tells you that that's not what they're interested in. They're saying that's what they're interested in, but they said that's not. If they were interested in it, they would not fire those people. So that's the first tell. So what are they interested in if they're not really interested in waste, fraud, and abuse? Well, they might say they follow on by saying, well, we're trying to eliminate the budget deficit. Well, if you're going to eliminate the budget deficit, 86% of the budget is either entitlements, Medicare, Social Security, defense spending, or interest payments on the deficit. They're not touching any of that. They're increasing the defense spending and they're lowering tax rates. So they're mucking around in the other 14%. It's a rounding error. Whatever they do is going to be trivial. Then you might say, well, they're making government more transparent. They're making it so hard to know. They're taking data down from all over these websites. They make it really hard to know what's going on inside these places. When they do publish something they've done, it is invariably a lie or a distortion or an exaggeration, like making claims that just aren't true. So it's not that. So I mean, it's a puzzle. I'm puzzled actually a little bit now because none of those things are what they're after. I mean, one simple explanation, if it were true, if Donald Trump were actually just functioning for Vladimir Putin, this is kind of what he would do. I mean, that would be a simple explanation. That it's just he's sticking sand in the gears of the United States government and really important functions. The effect of it, and the fifth risk is a good title for this. The effect of it is to just raise the risks of lots of bad things happening. I mean, I feel like we're playing a game of Russian roulette and they've stuck a couple more bullets in the chambers. And so we're just odds of like a bad thing happening, whether it's another pandemic, or it's a nuclear weapon going off when it shouldn't go off, or it's flights going down because the FAA is now understaffed and the weather reports are no good because they've just disabled NOAA and the National Weather Service, which they did a couple days ago, or social revolution. I mean, they a week ago they didn't gut, but arguably gutted. They did some damage to veterans health care. Um, it's it's uh, it's like where a lot of people who don't have the money to go take care of themselves and who've served the country get their health care. The whole thing's obscene, um, and it's obscene especially because it's pretty clear, not the whole Trump administration, but it's pretty clear that the Doge characters, Elon Musk and his little army of mini Musks, they don't know anything about the government. Like they haven't done the work I've done. We just go in and just ask people what you do. And I got to also ask, like, in what world is the best way to manage a big institution to come in and insult everybody who works there and treat them with derision and scorn and try to turn them into villains? Like he kind of did this. He did this at Twitter, right? It's the way he approached Twitter, and he was like, "Oh," and he got everybody all excited about what a badass he was. But the last mark on Twitter, if you bought in with Elon Musk, your mark is 60% below what you paid. He's done damage to the place. I don't know any management textbook or anybody who's actually managed anything big who would go about it this way. And what I would love to hear, I sorry to go on so much about this, but I would like to get in a room a dozen people we agree are masterful managers of large organizations. It is a gift. That dude at Microsoft, he's got some kind of gift. I like to get him in a room and say, do you think this is a smart way of approaching the workforce in a large organization that you want to reform? Is this going to work? I bet we go 0 for 12 in the answers. Like nobody would say this is smart. So what's going on? I mean, something is going on. It's kind of nefarious, um, I'm amazed that it's gone this far. I thought when I wrote the fifth risk, I thought kind of comedy. Like it's going to go. I don't think this is going to get so bad that this is going to have been a warning to the country of what was coming. It was more like, here, look at these things that they're don't know anything about, and don't want to run and want to neglect. You might want to pay attention now. The idea that they come in and maliciously sort of destroy the operation, I just didn't think it would happen because I just think it's not gonna. It doesn't. I don't see how it pays. I don't see what the end game is.
The Washington Post commented on the fifth risk. You might remember this. They called it a love letter to underappreciated people and old fashioned notions, which is exactly what you kind of described and what we're about to see. And I think the stories here are not just about people losing their jobs, to your point, and not the accidents that can end up happening, whether there's a disease or, whatever outbreaks there could be, things like that. It's that
Right.
there's other people that are dependent on these. And yes, of course, there's waste in the government. And again, I'm shocked that a person who has benefited the most from government spending, and specifically government spending around the environment, around the weather, around everything, is Elon Musk. And he's in there. So you're right. It's just nuts.
Let's say the thing. And the thing is, Tesla would never have got off the ground without loans and loan guarantees from to the tune of like 70, I can't remember, it was hundreds of millions of dollars, from the Department of Energy. Like, it's kind of like a misunderstanding. And then he swans around like he just created it all by himself. And it's when in a just world, like the American taxpayer, the American people would own a huge chunk of Tesla. And it's you're right. It's hypocritical. It's just gross, it's the whole thing is gross, and something happened to that man. I mean, it's like some combination of, like, too many drugs or too much social media, but I don't think he's the same dude he was as he was a decade ago.
So Walter Isaacson beat you to writing the book about Elon Musk.
Ah,
Not that you want to, or that you
right.
would have. And obviously, I saw that interview at 92nd Street Y. It was great, and you had said that you had read it in a period of 3.5 days. And you said what he did was, Walter Isaacson, he presented kind of a neutral attitude towards Elon Musk and let the reader figure it out. I mean, I know
Yep.
it's only been 3 months since that interview, but do you think that Walter Isaacson feels a little bit differently now? Not that he regrets writing the book at all, but do you think his viewpoint may have changed a little bit?
So I haven't spoken to him about it, so I'm speaking out of turn here, but I'll do it. Um, you can't hold the writer accountable to what happened, how his subject behaved after the book is published. He's like writing about what, he couldn't predict what was gonna happen. But I think I guessed he probably smelled a slightly different character who took the chainsaw to Twitter than the character he got interested in the first place. That he was interested in a builder, not a destroyer, and that I suspect that he looks at it now and thinks, "Yeah, I described him exactly how he was then, but if I was writing the book now, it would be different." I think.
So you had an interesting situation because where Walter Isaacson got thrown in following Musk around and he goes into Twitter and he brings the kitchen sink and all that stuff. You were writing Going Infinite when Sam Bankman-Fried, literally, when all the shit went down in the middle of you just learning about crypto and FTX and all this stuff. Very similar situation. And, you stay neutral on somebody, but that type of volatility, that was unheard of. Granted, you were talking to us while things had kind of already happened, but what's that like in real time to, obviously read the book? And would you think anything differently now than you did previously having written that book in real time?
So I didn't. So it's really important to know. I did not write a word of that book until he's in jail. So he was already gone from extradited from the Bahamas and in prison in Brooklyn before I even started writing it. So I knew the end. I kind of knew the end before I started the beginning. But I didn't know what the story was. But it's true. I was with him for a year and 4 months. Wandering around, sort of like watching and interviewing all around him, interviewing the VCs, interviewing the politicians, and trying to figure out what the story was. Um, so to answer your question, this is horrible to say, but it's absolutely true. How was it? Fun. It's like crazy fun. It's like it's but it's fun the way it was fun being a little kid when a hurricane came into New Orleans. Like, none of this damage is really going to affect me, and I'm just going to watch it. Go throw the frisbee in the wind. It's and so and it was fun making narrative sense of the events, and it was fun tracing a character who went from being so lionized to so despised. Like, if he was just worshipped by, like, by everybody, all the people around him. He was a cult figure, to being like he had no friend. I liked being skeptical when he was lionized personally with him and towards him, and I liked being a little defensive about him once he was hated because I thought they both went way too far. I don't think he should be in jail for 25 years. I think that's insane. All the people got their money back. He did do something bad. I don't know. A few years seems to be about right. It's just like it seems crazy and brutal what has been done to him. But I don't deny he did something bad. I don't deny that there was a fraud committed. None of that. I saw that was obvious. I mean, how $13 billion or whatever, $11 billion go from his exchange into his private hedge fund? There's no good answer about how that happens. It's not just a mistake he didn't see. So, but it was like this thing is more nuanced. It's like, for example, you miss everything that's interesting about it if you default completely to, "Oh, he's just a crook and he was cynical right from the beginning about everything. He was just out to steal people's money." That's so far from what was true. You miss what's interesting if you think, "Oh, the effective altruism stuff was just a stunt to fool people." He still thinks he's an effective altruist. So it's just people are interesting. They're just more interesting. And the kind of Twitter quick judgment thing about people and events, it's so shallow and wrong and losing the joy and nuance of life. And one of the great things about books is you can keep all that. You can live with more complexity. It has the second order effect, aside from being like a joy to experience, as brutal as it was for him, as much of a joy as it was to write the book. The book was just fun as hell to write. I mean, it was just like it was a joyride. It was fantastic material. I knew that I was gonna piss off a lot of people when it came out, and that was just part of the deal. Um, I didn't quite anticipate just how loudly people would be pissed off, but I hadn't heard the megaphone. The megaphone gets louder and louder out there. The social media, the tribes, it just gets louder and louder. So I think that I did took me a few weeks to understand, oh, this is just part of the deal now. If I write a book I really like, it's usually gonna be causing some trouble, and that trouble is it's gonna rebound on me in different ways. Imagine if Flash Boys had come out now, with social media where it is. I mean, it was loud at the time. It was like all these people were saying I didn't know what I was talking about. Brad Katsuyama didn't know what he was talking about. I had been duped or whatever. Uh, it is not, and now emerged it's like doctrine. Everyone in the SEC has read the book and said we got to fix the problem. It's like nobody
Do we
who's
have an
actually
SEC? Wait a minute. What SEC are you
yeah, it used
referring to?
the
Oh, the
old
old
ones,
days. Oh, yeah.
in the
Yeah.
old days, back in the old days, yes. But even Trump's the guy who was Trump's first SEC commissioner. He was really interested in it. It's like, yeah, this is a problem. Uh, so but it's just like it's just going to be part of the deal now. That's okay. It's just going to be a little uglier. It's like our political life. It's like our social life. It's all a little uglier. So publishing life is a little uglier. I have on the wall right here my first positive Amazon review of Going Infinite. It was like there were like 30 0 1 star whatever reviews before the book was published, which was impossible because the book was embargoed, but people were just out for it. And I got in the car the first morning to go do the publicity, and my publicist from the publishing firm said, "You got good news and bad news." She said, "The good news is you got your first 5 star review." She said, "The bad news is it's by Walker Lewis." And my son he'd seen
Okay.
all the shit going on. He says, "Oh, he was just terrified. He thought I was going to be strung up." He went on. He goes like, "Lewis's best book ever," and it goes on and on and on. But he left his name. It's on the top. It says Walker Lewis.
That's amazing. That's great. And what's amazing to me is that the people that didn't get enough, um, not blame, but criticized enough were the VC firms that were putting in all this money. And the one thing you think about the macro trade itself, right? Where Bitcoin was, okay, that was the right trade. Obviously, he didn't have people in operations that stopped him from doing these things that were illegal, what he did with the commingling of funds and bringing it to Alameda and all this stuff, right? I'm making excuses. But where were the VC? I mean, when you write that book and you're writing about how he shows up in these meetings, how he gets on a plane with you and he's going to this, big event and he doesn't even have a jacket or it's coming out of a little bag. I mean, I can see that
He's got
there's, you feel for the guy because But shame on these VC firms for not putting adults, I would call them, because I didn't read one adult in the book, in place that could watch this thing. Because that to me was the real. I wonder if that had happened, what would have happened? And to your
Yeah,
point,
yeah.
he made a lot of other investments, which I know are part of the, I guess judgments that have gone on to people that have done extremely well. That where he just threw money at various things, right, from that stuff. So it's who knows if that's the last chapter for that guy, right? But
Who knows? You know what's funny is it would be funny is no one's done this. To analyze Sam Bankman-Fried as a VC. Because what he did is he created without the permission of his investors a VC firm. He took their billions of dollars and he put them into VC investments. And they look at the time, it was such a rattle bag of different stuff. There was no coherence to it. It was just Sam's world. But stuff that seemed crazy, like, oh, he bought a 20% stake of Anthropic, this AI firm. Why would anybody pay for John Ray, the guy whose job it was to evaluate these assets when the bankruptcy guy, he told me personally that none of this stuff was worth anything, and that Anthropic, as an example, he said Anthropic, like, what is this shit? It's like it's worth zero. That's the stake. That stake is, I think, worth $6 billion. And for which Sam paid whatever half a billion. He 10x'd a lot of stuff. And it's be funny to just like evaluate how he performed compared to his peers at that time. I suspect pretty well.
well, Michael, listen, I've been a fan of yours. 35 years ago, Liar's Poker was the first kind of nonfiction business book I ever read. And to become friends with you years later through The Big Short has been amazing. I value that more than you know. And I look forward, like everyone else does, to whatever project you're working on next. I assume after this next book comes out about the government, that we might see a sports gambling book. I will not give you any more recommendations, on that. But if I do see something, I will mention it to you. And
No,
I
I
hope to
no,
see
I no.
some.
You have a pass, man. If you've already figured out you could how to be useful. If you actually have ideas, you should let me know because you're near stuff I'm just not near. Your life naturally takes you to places that I would like to be literarily.
Michael, thanks so much for coming on the tape. Really appreciate it.
Totally fun, Danny.